Imagine this: a civilization that has decoded the human genome, photographed black holes, and built machines capable of simulating the origin of the universe, and yet that same civilization is plagued by loneliness, division, anxiety, and meaninglessness. Isn't it strange that in the age of the quantum, we are still bewildered by the question of who we are? This paradox of brilliant minds and broken hearts is not merely a philosophical curiosity, it is a signal, a cosmic flare sent into the night sky, warning us that technological advancement without inner evolution is like a spaceship with no navigation system, capable of great speed, but utterly lost. We are standing at the edge of a planetary shoreline, not of sand and water, but of consciousness itself. A wave is rising not of water, but of awareness. You may not see it on the evening news or feel it in the algorithms of your social feed, but it's there and it's growing. It is a wave not just of information, but of transformation. You see, the universe has always spoken in waves: light waves, sound waves, gravitational waves. They ripple through the cosmos, carrying energy, data, meaning. And now, in the quantum sea of human experience, another wave approaches zone not born in stars, but stirred from within us. The wave of awakening. Now, before we let that phrase drift too far into the poetic, let's ground it. Because awakening is not about ascension into some mystical realm. It's not about escaping your body or vibrating higher into abstraction. It's about seeing clearly, courageously, scientifically what is and what could be. We are creatures of patterns. Our brains evolved to detect them, to predict, prepare, and survive. But some patterns are prisons: economic patterns, social patterns, thought patterns. These patterns, when left unchallenged, become dogmas. And dogmas, when left unchecked, become systems of unconscious obedience. That's why awakening matters. Because when enough people see the pattern changes. And so here we are, hurtling through space at 67, 0 miles per hour around the sun, spinning on a tilted axis, protected by an electromagnetic field, sipping our morning coffee while debating reality through glowing rectangles. We forget how extraordinary this is, how improbable it is, how cosmic it is. But the universe remembers. It remembers in photons, in gravitational distortions, in the neural firings of thinkers and rebels and dreamers. It remembers that life, at its best, is not a sleepwalk, but a conscious, deliberate dance with mystery. So let me ask, what does it mean to wake up in a universe like this? Not just to open your eyes, but to truly see, to see the systems you live inside, the stories you've inherited, the beliefs you never questioned, to recognize that much of what we call normal is merely collective agreement on illusions passed down from minds afraid of the unknown. The awakening wave doesn't come to destroy. It comes to reveal. Like a lens ground finer and finer until what was once blurred becomes astonishingly sharp. What it reveals, however, may not be easy. It may show us our addictions to convenience, our worship of productivity, our fear of uncertainty, our strange attachment to suffering simply because it's familiar. But here's the good news. The human brain is neuroplastic. The human heart is resilient. And the cosmos, it doesn't make junk. It makes potential. It births stars from dust. It crafts galaxies from chaos. And within each of us, it has embedded the same capacity for emergence, for metamorphosis. That's the awakening. It is not a conspiracy. It is not an event with a countdown clock. It's a frequency, a harmonic, a rising potential inside the human experience to no longer be passive participants in systems that dehumanize, divide, and distract us from the majesty of existence. In the years leading up to now, you may have felt it, the restlessness, the discontent, the inexplicable sense that something is off, not just politically or economically, but ontologically. Something in our way of being has grown stale. Our species, once driven by curiosity, is being anesthetized by comfort. Comfort, while pleasant, is not the same as growth. And as any astrophysicist knows, growth comes from pressure. Stars are born under gravitational collapse. So too are awakenings born under the weight of unsustainable paradigms. 2020 was one such moment of pressure. A forced pause, a global experiment in vulnerability. Some say it was a tragedy. Some say it was a hoax, but perhaps it was a mirror, a cosmic timeout, not to punish, but to reveal. And what it revealed was not new, it was what had long been ignored. We realized that silence can be deafening, that solitude can be both prison and portal, that systems built on profit at the expense of people begin to collapse under scrutiny, and in that collapse, something began to stir. We saw teachers become heroes. We saw frontline workers reveal the sacred. We saw nature begin to heal when human noise dimmed for a moment. We also saw fear mutate into control, information weaponized, trust corroded. But even that too was part of the revealing. You see, the awakening doesn't just shine light on beauty. It shines it on shadow. And only those willing to look into that light without flinching, without denial can truly evolve. Now, you might be asking, what do we do with this awareness? Do we meditate more, change careers, abandon society and start a homestead in the mountains? Perhaps, but more profoundly, we begin with perception, because perception is the operating system of reality. Two people can live in the same city, walk the same streets, and experience two entirely different worlds. One sees crisis, the other sees opportunity. One sees the system, the other sees the stars. This isn't naivety, it's quantum. The observer effect is real. We are not passive spectators in the universe. We are co-authors. We are shapers of the very reality we interpret. The wave function collapses not just when observed, but when understood. And so we begin to reclaim authorship. We begin to question the unquestioned. Why do we define success the way we do? Why is burnout a badge of honor? Why are we terrified of stillness? Why do we entrust our inner compass to algorithms? These are not merely philosophical musings. These are survival questions. Because if we don't ask them, someone else will answer them for us. And usually, those answers will benefit someone else's bottom linen, not your soul's expansion. The wave of awakening is not just philosophical poetry or a metaphor for social progress. It is a measurable, observable shift in the patterns of collective human behavior, perception, and desire. Look at how millions are now questioning the structure of their lives, not out of rebellion, but out of realization. People are no longer asking, how can I succeed in this system? But rather, why does this system define success the way it does? That shift in questioning, subtle as it may appear, is equivalent to an astronomical recalibration of orbits. It signals not just a repositioning of values, but a fundamental gravitational change in human intention. And when intention shifts on a mass scale, so too does civilization. Think about it this way. Our galaxy, the Milky Way, is on a slow-motion collision course with the Andromeda Galaxy. Though it won't happen for billions of years, the trajectory has already been set. Two massive systems containing hundreds of billions of stars are heading for a cosmic embrace not of destruction, but of transformation. New stars will be born from the friction. New systems will emerge from the chaos. That's what happens when two great bodies, bound by gravity, meet. The old structures get shattered, but new beauty emerges in the ruins. In many ways, our global society is undergoing a similar process. The systems we've lived, bioeconomic, social, educational, even spiritual air, colliding with a new awareness, a new frequency of being. And yes, that collision brings friction. It brings discomfort. But it also brings opportunity, the kind of opportunity that only arises when we dare to question the orbit we've been following for generations. But make no mistake, awakening is not passive. It's not something that just happens to us. It requires participation. It demands a form of courage that science itself celebrates: the courage to doubt, to explore, to revise. Galileo faced the Inquisition not because he was wrong, but because he was right too early. Darwin was ridiculed not because he hated God, but because he followed the evidence. Every awakening begins as heresy in the eyes of the status quo. And yet, without those heretics, humanity would still believe that the Earth is the center of the universe. or that slavery is natural, or that women cannot lead, or that love must fit into specific rules. So when you feel the discomfort of questioning long-held beliefs, remember you are participating in the sacred tradition of cosmic evolution. To awaken is not to find answers, it is to become intimate with better questions. Questions that do not soothe, but stir. Not, what career should I pursue to be successful, but what kind of work aligns with the rhythm of my deepest knowing. Not, how can I be accepted, but what parts of myself am I betraying in the name of belonging? These are not indulgent reflections. These are the cosmic coordinates by which we steer our inner ship. The great astronomer Carl Sagan once said, "We are a way for the universe to know itself." That statement is more than poetic. It is literal. In you, the carbon from stars has arranged itself into a pattern capable of self-reflection. And that reflection, that strange, miraculous capacity to observe your own thoughts, your own culture, your own place in time, is the birthplace of awakening. When you begin to see not only the external world, but the internal programming that interprets it, you gain power. Not the kind of power that dominates others, but the kind of power that liberates yourself. The kind that no government, no crisis, no algorithm can take away. And this is where it becomes practical. Awakening, contrary to the misconception, is not about escaping responsibility, it's about embracing a higher form of it. It means no longer blaming the system for everything wrong in your life, but also not blindly accepting the system as just. It means saying, yes, the world is flawed, but how am I complicit in that flaw? By what I accept, repeat, and ignore. It means refusing to outsource your inner authority to any ideology, group, or influencer, because in the end, they cannot live your truth for you. You must calibrate your own telescope. You must interpret the data of your life with the rigor and wonder of a cosmic scientist. This is not about becoming perfect. Perfection is an illusion. The universe doesn't do perfect. It does complexity. It does emergence. It does feedback loops and second chances. In the cosmic story, the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs paved the way for mammals. The entropy of death gives rise to the soil for new life. So too, in your life, the breakdowns are not signs of failure, they're signals of recalibration. Invitations to evolve. And yet, many will resist this wave. That's to be expected. Resistance is a natural part of evolution. Cells resist mutation. Cultures resist change. The immune system resists foreign body 7 when those bodies bring healing. So don't be surprised when your awakening is met with ridicule, dismissal, or silence. That doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you're early. And to be early is to be alone for a time, but not forever, because the wave is not yours alone. It is cresting across continents, whispered in poems, screamed in protests, coded into art, decoded in therapy rooms, and surfacing in the silent tears of those who can no longer pretend. The cosmos teaches us this: no wave rises without first disturbing the surface. And every disturbance, every ripple, is an invitation to look deeper, not just at the world, but at ourselves. The next chapter of human history is not being written by governments or corporations. It's being written in minds that are willing to evolve. It's being shaped by individuals who, in quiet defiance of the norm, choose awareness over numbness, connection over control, questions over certainty, and presence over performance. You are not a passenger in this process. You are the wave itself. To say that you are the wave may sound poetic, but it is grounded in science. Every decision you make, every perception you alter, sends ripples through the quantum field of collective human behavior. This is not metaphor, it's physics. We are entangled, not just emotionally or biologically, but fundamentally. Quantum entanglement tells us that particles, once connected, remain in a state of shared information, regardless of the distance between them. The universe, in its quiet complexity, has shown us that separation is an illusion. What you awaken to within yourself is not isolated. It vibrates outward, reshaping the invisible lattice of shared consciousness. That's why your choices matter more than you think. Because you are not just changing your life, you are subtly changing the field from which all lives emerge. Let's bring this down to Earth for a moment. The turbulence we see in our world in politics, in economics, in culture is not just a series of unfortunate events, it is the outer expression of inner dissonance. When enough people live in fear, society calcifies. When enough people live unconsciously, systems lose integrity. But when enough people begin to awaken to their own agency, to their own pattern-making capacity, the world begins to repattern itself in ways previously thought impossible. We saw glimpses of this during global crises. When lockdowns paused the machinery of busyness, something extraordinary happened. People reevaluated, not because they were told to, but because stillness finally had a chance to speak. And in that stillness, some heard the faint voice of purpose. Others saw the illusions they had been feeding. Some began to question why the architecture of their lives was built on productivity instead of meaning. But here's the challenge with awakening. Once you see, you cannot unsee. And seeing is not always comforting. In fact, it's often painful, because you begin to recognize how many of your choices were not made from freedom, but from conditioning. How many of your opinions were inherited rather than investigated? How many of your habits were coping mechanisms disguised as personality traits? That realization can be disorienting, but disorientation is a sign that the compass of consciousness is trying to reset. You are not losing your mind. You are finding your alignment. This is why the wave feels like pressure. It is pressure. It is the compression of centuries of human sleepwalking coming up against the emerging force of remembrance. Remembrance of what? Of who we are. Not just as citizens or consumers or followers of a particular faith or political ideology, but as cosmic phenomena, as consciousness housed in matter, able to reflect, to choose, to create. And so we return to choice. The wave does not demand obedience. It offers opportunity. It says, here is what you've inherited. Here is what you've accepted. Here is what is possible. Now, what will you do? That's the pivot point of every awakening. Will you adapt, evolve, and engage? Or will you cling to the familiar even if it no longer serves you? We must not romanticize this moment. Awakening is not euphoric. It is disruptive. It breaks things. It breaks cycles of self-betrayal. It breaks the hypnotic rhythm of mass conformity. It breaks the illusion that comfort is the goal of life. It replaces these with clarity, with responsibility, with depth that may not sell as well as escapism, but it endures longer. It transforms more deeply, and it offers a sense of fulfillment that dopamine hits and external validation never could. The systems you see crumbling around you are not failing. They are completing their function. They served a purpose in a particular epoch of consciousness. But now we are entering a new one. You can feel it in the restlessness of young minds. You can hear it in the poetry of the disillusioned. You can observe it in the rewilding of values. Less greed, more meaning, less extraction, more regeneration, less hierarchy, more collaboration. This is not a fantasy. It is evolution expressing itself in culture. But the evolutionary leap is not guaranteed. The wave may pass, and many may never ride it. History is filled with missed moments, epochs, where consciousness had a chance to shift, but fear won. Where potential emerged, but was rejected. Where the future knocked, but no one opened the door. The only way we ensure that this time is different is by choosing differently, not once, but every day. With every thought you entertain, with every word you speak, with every system you support or withdraw from. The small daily choices are the quantum levers of transformation. And make no mistake, this wave is global. Awakening is not the property of any religion, movement, or ideology. It is not branded. It is not packaged in motivational sound bites. It rises in the scientists questioning their data. It rises in the activist refusing dehumanization. It rises in the artist painting truths the world doesn't want to see. It rises in the parent who dares to raise children free of inherited trauma. It rises in the teenager who questions what adulthood should even mean. It rises in you when you stop asking, how should I fit in? And start asking, what am I here to create? You are not here by accident. That's not a belief, it's a statistical reality. The odds of your existence with your exact DNA, experiences, and moment in time are astronomically small. And yet, here you are, thinking, listening, feeling, choosing. What more evidence do you need that you are the universe expressing itself through a rare configuration of matter and spirit? So the question is no longer, is the wave real? It's, am I ready to respond to it? The first step is simple. Notice. Notice what no longer resonates. Notice the habits that drain your soul. Notice the thoughts that keep you small. Notice the systems that profit from your disconnection. Notice, and then gently but firmly begin to shift, not in reaction, but in alignment. The next stage of awakening is not a mass revolution, it's a personal evolution, a quiet reorientation from survival to sovereignty, from mimicry to originality, from noise to signal. It is a remembering that being alive is not a task, it is a privilege. And that privilege comes with a question the universe has never stopped asking, what will you do with your light? As the wave swells higher, its influence becomes more visible in the world of form. Nowhere is this more evident than in the domain of money. Currency, value, wealth, these are not merely economic instruments. They are mirrors of collective belief. What we call money is, in truth, an agreementa shared hallucination backed not by gold, but by trust. That trust has a frequency. It fluctuates with our perception of stability, authority, and truth. And today, that frequency is wobbling. Economic systems are complex, adaptive networks. They are influenced by psychology, policy, technology, and global events. Shocks may appear sudden, but often they are the delayed result of long-term trends patterns we can study, model, and understand. The challenge is not to fear upheaval, but to learn from it with the tools of critical thinking and scientific inquiry. The systems that once relied on your obedience now tremble under the weight of your awakening. As more people begin to question not just what they earn, but why they earn it, and whether that pursuit serves life or merely sustains machinery, the monetary system, like all outdated architectures, must adjuster collapse. But this collapse is not the end. It is the recalibration. The old narrative told us that security comes from external validation from jobs, titles, property, and investments. But awakening reminds us, true wealth begins within, not as a bumper sticker, as a physics. Because your internal belief system is the resonance chamber through which all outer experience flows. If you carry the frequency of fear, lack, or victimhood, you will attract structures that reinforce those codes. But if you begin to shift even slightly toward the awareness that you are not here to compete, but to co-create, then the economic game begins to play by different rules. You stop being a pawn and begin operating as a conscious participant in the energetic economy of reality. That may sound abstract until you realize it already governs your life. You felt it in moments of synchronicity when the right person shows up, the opportunity arises, or the solution presents itself at the precise moment of surrender. That's not coincidence. That's coherence. That's what happens when your internal algorithm aligns with the greater logic of the cosmos. And in that alignment, resources begin to flow not because you demanded them, but because you became a channel clear enough to receive them, not through effort alone, but through clarity. Clarity is currency, not because it buys things, but because it arranges your priorities into a geometry that the universe can respond to. Clarity tells the quantum field, this is who I am now. This is what I'm available for. This is the story I no longer carry. And the field forever listen adjusts. But let us be real. The world does not reward clarity immediately. Systems built on distraction fear the one who sees. Marketing empires rely on confusion. Political structures thrive on division. Financial institutions depend on dependency. So when you begin to awaken, to simplify, to detach from drama, don't expect applause. Expect resistance. Not because you are wrong, but because you are leaving the gravitational field of unconsciousness, and escape velocity always burns. The mind, too, will resist. It will whisper, "Who do you think you are?" It will echo ancestral fears of survival. It will tempt you with old comforts. But if you observe closely, you'll see that most of your suffering is not caused by the world, it's caused by the interpretation of the world through outdated code. Thoughts like, "I'll never be free. I have to struggle to deserve love. I'm too late." These thoughts are not facts. They are artifacts, fossils of an old paradigm. You do not need to excavate them with judgment. You only need to upgrade your mental operating system. And like any upgrade, this one may require a reboot, a temporary loss of function, a recalibration. You may lose people, habits, even parts of your identity. That's not failure. That's formatting. That's the price of coherence. And coherence is what the wave of awakening demands. Not perfection, but resonance. You cannot fake resonance. The universe doesn't react to your thoughts or affirmations. It follows physical laws, but your biology, your stress responses, your attention, your choices does affect your environment, your outcomes, and your interpretation of reality. It's not about energy in a mystical sense. It's about psychology, neuroscience, and cause and effect. What you consistently focus on shapes your perception, and perception, in turn, directs your path. This is why the next phase of awakening requires embodiment. Not just knowledge, but integration. Not just insight, but practice. Not just talking about consciousness, but living your finances, your relationships, your digital behavior, your attention span. Attention is the most valuable currency of the 21st century. And the greatest act of resistance you can perform is to reclaim it from the scroll, from the spin, from the noise that hijacks your awareness and feeds your uncertainty. Because in that awareness lies your most sacred asset, your ability to choose. And that choice, though microscopic in any given moment, is cosmically significant. Because with each choice, you are either affirming the old narrative or creating the new one. You are either reacting from programming or responding from presence. The difference is subtle, but the consequences are profound. One perpetuates entropy, the other generates order. One leads to exhaustion, the other to evolution. So when the next financial wave hits and it will pause, don't just ask, "What am I losing?" Ask, "What am I being invited to see?" When systems shake, it is not only to punish, but to reveal. They reveal where our trust was misplaced, where our roots were shallow, where our truth was outsourced. And in that revelation is a rare opportunity to rebuild, not just externally, but existentially, to redefine what wealth is, what power is, what freedom feels like, not as a concept, but as a visceral knowing in the body. A knowing that no algorithm, no institution, no ideology can erase. This is the terrain of the wave now. Not just spiritual, not just philosophical, but structural, tangible. It will ask you to rethink everything from how you earn, to how you love, to how you vote, to how you rest. It will show you that rest is not laziness, but rebellion in a culture of exhaustion. That joy is not frivolous, but fuel. That boundaries are not selfish, but sacred. And most of all, that awakening is not a destination, it is a daily practice. A practice of radical presence, of courageous questioning, of becoming, moment by moment, a clearer signal for the world you wish to inhabit. As the wave rises, it does not lift all boats equally. This is not because the universe plays favorites, but because resonance requires readiness. And readiness requires responsibility. That's the paradox. The more empowered you become, the more accountable you must be. In the coming months and years, this awakening will not manifest as a singular, collective transformation. Rather, it will fracture into two timeline S2 parallel experiences coexisting within the same planetary space. On one side, a world descending into confusion, clinging to obsolete systems, gripped by fear, disoriented by change. On the other, a quieter but growing stream of individuals realigning with integrity, operating from clarity, and awakening not in theory, but in embodiment. This divergence is not fiction, it is pattern. It is already observable in the language people use, in how they respond to crisis, in what they value, and in the signals they send into the informational field. We are seeing the early formation of what could be described, not mystically, but anthropologically, as a split in consciousness. The same external event may occur, a crash, a disruption, a revelation, and two people may interpret it in entirely different ways. One sees loss, betrayal, apocalypse. The other sees clarity, initiation, rebirth. Same world, different lens. This is not delusion. This is neuroplasticity, choice, and the evolutionary power of perspective. This bifurcation will deepen. It will not be marked by a single calendar date, nor announced on television. It will unfold silently, like tectonic plates shifting beneath the ocean. You may find yourself increasingly unable to relate to certain conversations, behaviors, or goals that once defined you. You may notice that people around you seem to be living in a reality you no longer recognize. That is not arrogance, that is evolution. Do not try to force reconciliation where the frequency has diverged. Compassion, yes. Attachment, no. The wave will separate what is no longer in harmonic resonance. And that is not a tragedy, it is a tuning. But here lies the sacred tension. How do we thrive in the midst of this divergence without turning our awakening into superiority? How do we hold space for those still in fear while not collapsing into their narrative? The answer is humility. Scientific, grounded, cosmic humility. To awaken does not make you better. It makes you more responsible. It means you've seen further and now must live more intentionally. And when you are blessed with sight, your task is not to shame the blind but to become a lighthouse. Not a rescuer, not a preacher, a lighthouse. Silent, unyielding, clear in its presence. This next wave will test not only your vision but your integrity. The external chaos may intensify. Economies fluctuating beyond prediction, politics fragmenting into noise, institutions scrambling to maintain relevance. It may feel like the center cannot hold, and for many it won't, but in the eye of that storm there will be peace. Not the peace of escape, the peace of alignment. Because when your internal architecture is sound, the external collapse does not destabilize you. You realize the world is not ending, the old paradigm is, and from its compost, something extraordinary is preparing to grow. For those tuned to this frequency, the months ahead will not be about mere survival, they will be about unprecedented flourishing. Resources will come not magically, but mathematically from the reorganization of energy. When you stop leaking power through fear, performance, and self-betrayal, that energy returns to you. It becomes creativity, intuition, magnetic clarity. The right people appear. The aligned opportunities emerge, not because you manifested them like a trick, but because you matched them like a law. Like gravity meets mass, like light bends around density. This is the unseen economy of awakening. It is not speculative. It is measurable in heart rate, in coherence, in decision-making speed, in emotional regulation, in nervous system health. And soon, as science catches up, it will be measurable in the collective behavior of awakened individuals who no longer panic when the market dips, because their value no longer resides in external numbers. It resides in embodied sovereignty, and sovereignty, let us be clear, is not isolation. It is not hoarding wisdom while the world burns. Sovereignty is the capacity to remain centered, generous, and clear, even while others are losing their signal. It is the ability to hold paradox, to feel deep compassion for suffering while refusing to drown in it, to know that you cannot save everyone, and yet to continue offering what you can, not as martyrdom, as mathematics. Because what you give with integrity is never lost. It ripples through the field, recalibrating the frequency of the whole. You may wonder, is it selfish to thrive while others struggle? Is it ethical to pursue joy while the world aches? But joy is not the opposite of pain, it is its transmutation. It is the proof that awakening is not an abstraction. It is alive. It moves through you. It gives back. And so I say this clearly, do not apologize for flourishing. Use it. Let your radiance be evidence that another way is possible. That awakening is not a fantasy, but a functional upgrade to the human experience. This is how we surf the wave. Not by waiting for permission, not by needing consensus, but by choosing each day to align thought with truth, action with coherence, presence with purpose. And in doing so, you become the new template, not in theory, in biology, in family systems, in finance, in leadership, in art, in silence. The wave is not a metaphor. It is not coming. It is here. The tide has turned. You can feel it in your bones. You can sense it in the deep intelligence of your cells. And though the surface of the world may still thrash with confusion, below that noise, the current of awakening flows strong. You are not late. You are right on time, not to observe history, to shape it. So now we arrive at the edge. The shoreline of your old life is behind you. The familiar structure, however dysfunctional, have drifted into the horizon. And before you is the great unknown, not of the cosmos, but of yourself. The question is no longer, is the wave real? You've seen it. You've felt it. The question now is, will I ride it, or will I wait for the world to return to something that no longer fits me? Let us be honest, there is no going back. The curtain has been pulled, the code exposed, the illusion cracked. What once felt permanent has proven temporary. And what once felt invisible intuition, coherence, soul now pulses at the surface. This is not the end of reason, it is the expansion of it. A reason fused with wonder, a science fused with story. A life no longer fragmented into roles and routines, but integrated into something cosmic, coherent, whole. You are not simply awakening. You are becoming an anchor point in a planetary grid of transformation. Your thoughts are frequencies, your actions are signatures, your presence is data. And the universe is paying attention, not in judgment, but in resonance. It is asking, what signal will you transmit? What version of reality will you invest in? What future will your coherence fertilize? There is no correct answer. There is only the most honest one. The one that humbles you, that liberates you, that cracks open your chest and says, this is who I came to be, not for applause, but for alignment. You may not be able to explain it, but you can feel it. And that feeling is not random. It is the echo of a blueprint older than your name, a blueprint carried in your DNA, encoded in your breath, waiting for you to finally say yes. Yes to presence, yes to courage, yes to discipline, not the discipline of punishment, but of devotion. The devotion to show up day after day for a life that is not reactive, but responsive, not convenient, but meaningful, not guaranteed, but aligned. Because meaning is not found, it is forged under pressure, in uncertainty, by those brave enough to confront themselves. The wave of awakening is not a mystical force. It's the natural consequence of consciousness exposed to information and curiosity. It's not about salvation, but about evolution of thought, behavior, and perception. You are not small. You are quite literally made of stardust, carbon, oxygen, nitrogenal, forged in the cores of long-dead stars. And now, arranged in this unique pattern, you have the rare privilege of awareness. What will you do with it? And so, when the world trembles, when systems fracture and illusions scream, remember this: you are not here to fix the old. You are here to remember the new, to embody it, to live it so clearly that others remember too. You do not need to convert anyone. You only need to stop betraying what you know to be true. That is how the wave spreads. Not through noise, but through resonance. You will meet others in unlikely places, in quiet moments, people who carry that same frequency. You'll recognize them not by their words, but by their energy, as if some invisible tuning fork is vibrating between you. These are not accidents. These are nodal points in a living, breathing network of awakened consciousness. And when that network reaches critical mass, not through force, but through frequency, something irreversible will occur. Not a utopia, but a coherence. A collective hum of clarity that no system can suppress, a tipping point of truth that no institution can contain. And when that happens, you will not remember this era as the end. You will remember it as the great unmasking, the great unraveling, the The great return. Return to what? Not to a past, but to a principle. That life is sacred, that consciousness is creative, that you are not a mistake of biology, but a miracle of geometry. You are the meeting point of time and eternity, of dust and divinity. And now, as the wave crests above your head, you have a choice. Not whether to change the world, but whether to finally change how you show up in it. Will you become the frequency the future is waiting for? Will you be the signal in the static? Will you be the calm inside the storm? The wave is here. It is not metaphor. It is motion, and it does not wait. So, brace yourself and rise.